You're listening to the Mental Money Podcast, the show that shows you how to master your mind to maximize your money. This show is for people who love to watch their bank accounts grow while shifting their relationship to money. Without further ado, let's get these insider insights from today's leading expert. You are listening to the Mental Money Podcast. My name is Nathalie. I am a financial strategist, a credit expert. And as you know, I'm also the author of Converted. I'm sure you've heard the commercials throughout the podcast. We are dedicated to exploring the intersection between mindset and money. We bring on guests that help us do just that. Today we have with us Larissa. I pronounced that right?
Yes. Hi.
Okay,
great to be here.
Great to have you, Larissa. So today we're going to talk about mindset and money and how your job and how your work helps to merge and marry those two ideas. So for our guest, we like to ask, what would you like to cover first, mindset or money?
Actually, I'm a financial advisor who focuses on the mindset of money. So It's all together, right? So let's just kind of start going and start talking.
Right. So I appreciate that. We're going to merge the two. We're going to marry the two eventually. Gotcha. But what I like to do first is kind of like approach one or the other, because some people think it's just mindset. Some people think it's just money, right? Let's attack one and then we'll see how the two converge, and then maybe people will change their mind, maybe they won't. It's such a polarizing thing. It's like, no, you just need more money, and then people are like, no, the mindset goes with the money. I'm of the school of thought that both matter, and I'm sure you are too. But let's attack one. So which one would you want to cover first, mindset or money?
Let's start with the mindset.
Okay, perfect. A lot of people like to start with mindset. Okay. You believe, from what I understand, that your net worth is tied to your self-worth. Help us unpack that, because that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. So your net worth, I think, is tied to a lot more than your income, of course. I think the way that you value yourself and the way that you value your career or whatever you're doing business-wise has a lot to do with your net worth, because it has to do with how you react to the money that comes in. Mm-hmm. So your mindset on your net worth being based on your worth has you working harder to make sure that you're increasing your net worth. Mm-hmm. Whereas, a lot of people will just tie it to your income. So then if it's tied to your income and you're not happy with your income, that's kind of where the self-sabotaging acts come in.
Okay. Well, that brings up two questions. One, could you please explain to us what a net worth is, just so we're really clear on, like income versus net worth? Because it seems like you made a distinction between the two, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So your net worth is everything that you have. So any asset that you have, the value of all of those. So that can be your primary residence, if you own any other homes or any other property, as well as investment accounts, brokerage accounts, retirement accounts, all of those things come into your net worth and come together to create one number of what you are worth in total, both liquid cash and not liquid assets.
Right. Okay. That's fair. Now, I have reservations about tying it to our self-worth personally, because, and just this piece, right? Because I feel like people are worthy aside from their net worth or their income or whatever the case may be. So how can you give an example of like maybe what it might look like in the inverse?
Yeah. So I think, I'm not saying your net worth is tied to your self-worth. I'm saying that your self-worth has a lot to do with what your net worth will become, because it has to do with those behaviors. Okay. So the way that you view yourself will have an effect on your behaviors, which does have an effect on your net worth. Because if you do not value yourself, then you can kind of start in those self-sabotaging, where I've met people who make $200,000 a year and have nothing left at the end of the month. Right. I've met people who make $40,000 a year and are on track to retire early. So it doesn't have to do with income. It really has to do with your behavior and how you are handling and managing your money.
Okay. So what are some behaviors that you see people engage in that are like kind of anti-self-worth, net worth?
Impulse spending is a big one. A lot of people impulse spending is very tied to emotion most of the time. I can't say always, obviously, but most of the time an impulse spend is tied to an emotion where you're trying to make yourself feel better, or you're trying to fill a void within your life that the impulse spending doesn't usually fill. So that's where it really comes together to create what could be a problem, because if you're impulse spending often, then I mean, you're spending all of your money on things that you didn't need and things that you may not even remember you bought in a week. Yeah, right. I see that a lot. So right. I'd say that's one of the biggest self-sabotaging is just impulse spending and not paying attention to your spending.
Right. No, that's fair. So you mentioned something as far as like needs and how that self-sabotaging kind of works into it, but how do we even determine, like, okay, let's say we've acknowledged, or it's now raised into our awareness that we're impulse spending and that we need to scale that back, right? Mm-hmm. How do we even get to the point where we can differentiate a need between a want and kind of catch ourselves in that moment when we're about to make an impulse buy? Is that where you kind of come in on the mental side, or is there like a coping skill? Or, you see where I'm going with the question.
Yeah. So I have a great tip that I give to all of my clients is to wait minimum 24 hours before purchasing something that you've decided you want to purchase. So I like to say minimum 24 hours. A lot of people really do need that 48 hours to kind of think through the purchase. But I find giving it some time, especially if you're in Target and see something that you want, if you leave the store and then want to go back for it, go buy it. That means that you really did want that item and it's something that you see value in. Right. Whereas usually once you leave the store, you're not even going to remember that item that you wanted. And so that just saying that there's a 24-hour wait on anything unnecessary, and you tend to know what's unnecessary in your life, right? Does it serve a functional purpose in your everyday life or not? Right. So giving that 24 hours gives you more time really to think about it, or to just forget about the purchase altogether.
Okay. And so in that 24 hours, I'm just really just thinking through, well, first of all, do I even remember, right? Yeah, that I wanted it. Because that's the whole thing. And then the other thing is just really thinking through, like, how is this going to fit into my life long term? Or is this just like, so on the emotional piece, let's say I've decided maybe I don't need this, but how do you unpack what was actually going on that led you down to Target in the first place?
Yeah. So that's where I would generally come in, or working with, another financial advisor, where we can really talk through some of those problems that you're having. We can talk through your thought process. I have a background in psychology as well. So I'm really good at listening to people and listening to their thought process and kind of starting to break down what was happening there. Because the first step to fixing a problem is awareness of the problem, of course. Right. So being able to listen to people's stories, listen to what they have to say, and then really give some good psychological feedback on it has been really valuable for a lot of my clients. And then realizing what's actually causing the problem. And then after we figure out what's causing the problem, we like to kind of work on how we can replace the behavior with something more productive.
That's fair. So, okay. So in my work, what I found is that sometimes people come to you because they want to make a change, but there's not really that level of awareness, if that makes sense. Like, they kind of know something's wrong, but they don't really know even the extent or the severity of what's going on, right? Yes. So how do you deal, or how would you work through that resistance? As far as like, I'm here, I'm coming to you. So clearly there's a piece that wants to be addressed or wants to transform, but then there's also that piece where it's just like, oh, you're telling me I can't go to Target and spend my money, or you're telling me that I need to wait 48 hours. Like, how do we deal with that resistance?
So to be completely honest, you can't deal with that resistance with everybody. I've had clients who have come to me very ready to eliminate their debt, to get in a better financial place. And within 2 weeks, they are not calling me back and have made another financial decision that maybe it wasn't the best financial decision. Yeah. So it's really about, are you ready to make the change? It's honestly not something I can do for you. If you come to me and you're receptive to what I have to say, then you're ready to make the change. If you come to me and you're really not that receptive to it, you're probably not ready to make that mindset change that you do need to make, because you need to see that there is a problem, right? You need to want to change your spending habits. If you don't want to change your spending habits, you're not going to.
Right. No, that's very true. So I used to have that problem very early on in my business, where people would come to me for whatever financial service it was, or whatever strategy session it was that they booked. And then we talked through, okay, so here are some of the changes that need to be made in order to accomplish your goal. Right. And the pushback was so jarring. No, it really was. And I'm just like, okay, what am I doing wrong like how I thought it was me. I took it personally. I was like, what am I doing that's not, that these people aren't open or receptive to what's going on? Come to find out, my mentor at the time said, what was the phrase? It was amateurs convince, professionals sort.
Yes.
And it instantly clicked in my mind. And I was like, okay, so I created a new process now based on the book. And I'll drop the book in the comments because it's good for all phases of life, whether you're trying to change something about your finances, whether you're trying to change something about your weight or your relationship with your kids. Helping that awareness or which stage of change the person is actually in. And that questionnaire or that like discovery call was to help me understand what stage of change they were in. And if I found that they were in like that, not really ready to make a change, but they acknowledge that something was wrong phase, then I'd weed them out. And they'd look at me like I'm insane when I tell them, I'm not taking your money, you're not ready.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so I like to ask that question for people who really focus or like the mindset and money piece, because I want to see if you've maybe found a way to navigate against the resistance. No, if you did, yeah, I want to know. Okay, I will pay you for that answer. I will, because I haven't found one. It's just you need to come back when you're ready.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there are some people who have small amounts of resistance who it really is dependent on the amount of resistance, right? If they're just a little bit resistant, you can usually break through that just in, you know, some asking some questions, starting to get them more aware of, you know, their current situation. But there are people who are so far gone in their mindset that they can't make that change. And I don't want to take their money, you know, for no good reason.
Right. No, very fair. Okay, so I have a personal question. Well, kind of personal. So it's a business challenge that I'm having as far as like working through a mindset piece that I'm noticing is very prevalent, and mostly because of social media. I blame social media for this. But so, you know, I've worked in the personal finance space for a number of years now. And one thing that I've noticed, especially in my culture or like my ethnicity, is that there's a piece about seeing wealth as a sign of wealth versus understanding that wealth is on a continuum, right? And you talk about the continuum of wealth. I want to kind of more, and I want you to talk about the continuum of wealth, but I also want you to address understanding how you could help people understand that wealth does not mean that you drive a Porsche or that you own $1 million home, and not getting caught up in that. Because I see people getting scammed by people who rent cars and rent Airbnbs to give that appeal. Does that make sense?
Yes, I've seen that. I'm from California, so I saw it all the time.
Okay. Yeah. So could you address that piece about like the visual aspect of wealth versus like actual wealth generation, and maybe even the fact that both can exist, but also there are examples outside of that?
Yes. So I've met plenty of people who drove Lamborghinis who, I mean, you obviously have to be rich to own those kinds of things, but rich and wealthy are different. Rich is what you see. Wealth is what you don't see. So wealth hides in bank accounts, in brokerage accounts, in businesses that have money behind them. So the building of wealth is what you're not showing off. That is the money that you're keeping, the money that you have stashed so that you can maybe make a life change later in the future, so that you can buy that home in the future. If you are house poor, I've met a lot of people who are house poor, which I don't love that term, but it is a fair term, right? There are a lot of people who spend most of their income on their house every single month and really are barely keeping up with it just so that they can look better to their friends. And I like to kind of point out to people that just because your friends are thinking better of you doesn't mean that you feel better about yourself. Are you okay with the fact that you have no money left at the end of the month? Or maybe you just don't have very much. Are you okay with not retiring? Because that's the very real reality, is that you could not retire because of these habits.
Yeah. And you hit the point right on the head. It's about the perception. It's not necessarily about the actual asset acquisition, you know, like, am I at the end of the day when I asked my client one time, because she tried to comfort me personally about the appearance of wealth, which you've already made the distinction that it's riches that they're actually looking at, not wealth. Right. And I asked her, I was like, can I ask you a question? If you were blind, and this is no shot to anyone who has a visual impairment. But if she could not see for any reason, for at any given point in her life, for at any time, would those things matter?
Right. And they wouldn't, right?
They wouldn't.
Don't.
You wouldn't care.
Yeah.
So it's really, I guess, what my next question would be, how do we get on that continuum of wealth and kind of dismantle the appearance of it versus really being wealthy, actually being okay with ourselves at the end of the day, the part of us that people can't really see.
Right. I think the biggest thing is stop caring what other people think. Stop trying to impress everyone else with your money. Nobody cares. Nobody's that impressed, honestly. Mm-hmm. I lived in a city that was full of Porsches and Lamborghinis and Lexuses and Cadillacs, every fancy car you could imagine, $3 million homes. I was not impressed by any of that. Most of them were rude. They weren't very good people. And it's not something that people look at from the outside and are like, oh, wow, that person is great. I love that person. And that's what people think when they buy those things. They think that's what people are going to think about you. And it's not that. It's more about what you think about yourself. So how are you treating other people? How is your actual wealth coming along? Are you on track to retire? Do you have savings if something comes up? Do you have an emergency fund? These things are important, and you need to start caring more about your personal situation, not what other people think about your situation.
So is that what falls into what you describe as the continuum of wealth?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, definitely just the not caring about what other people think is a huge part of it, because it's the big reason that people buy these fancy things.
Okay. So let's transition more into money. I know you're enjoying the episode, but I wanted to quickly let you know about the book Converted, Uncover the Hidden Strategies You Need to Achieve Massive Credit Score Success. As you are on your financial journey, this book is designed to be the guide towards ensuring that your journey is as smooth as possible. Doesn't matter if you're clearing up your mindset or on the verge of having more money, credit is going to follow you forever. I bet you that you'll see, as you begin and continue to apply the resources mentioned in any given episode, credit will continue to come up, and we want you to get right. Go ahead and head to www.convertedcredit.com. That's www.convertedcredit.com. That's www.convertedcredit.com, and get your copy today. What insights do you think are important for us to know in that regard?
So I think as far as money goes, I mean, obviously making money is important for your financial success. So how much you make does play a factor into it, but there is a large mindset portion to it. So definitely investing, and investing doesn't always have to be in stocks or real estate or anything like that. Invest in yourself, invest in your skills, make yourself more marketable, get yourself a better job with a better income, better benefits, that 401k plan. It is just thinking about money as a full spectrum, as it is. It's a full spectrum rather than just you get it from your job and then you pay your bills with it, right? There's a full spectrum of financial strategies that can be put in place to put you in a better position.
For sure. Okay. And what are some of those strategies outside of like what you just noted? Like what have you worked with your clients? What have you seen work?
So a lot of my clients, I do a lot of debt elimination as well. And we'll do larger debts, more like a student loan type of debt rather than I'll help with credit cards and, we'll put together a plan for that. But there are actually investing strategies that we can use for those larger debts, such as eliminating those student loans. So $150,000. I really like to use an index universal life insurance policy, which is a permanent life insurance policy with a death benefit as well as a cash value. So it grows similar to an index fund, but it has a floor of 0%. So you are not going to be losing that money that you're putting in. It works really great for those people who do have families and do need that death benefit in the meantime. And since it does grow, again, like an index fund, you can usually get those larger loans paid off in a quicker amount of time than if you were to take that same amount of money and just throw it towards your loan.
So how long does it take to build that cash value from the time that the insurance policy is initiated?
So you can pull it out within 1 year. It depends on how much you're putting it in. There are some that offer an accelerated cash value where they'll give you more of that cash value up front. It does mean you lose some later. So if we have, a getting something paid off quickly kind of value to it, then sometimes that makes sense. But it usually is, I'd say 5 years is the average that I see where that cash value has really caught up with what your student loans own or what you owe on your student loans.
Yeah.
So about 5 years. And in that meantime, your death benefit is growing as well, because the cash value and the death benefit grow together. So if something were to happen in the meantime, your family would be taken care of rather than just having a slightly lower student loan debt to pay off.
Got you. And what's the rate of return as far as like the actual,
Yeah. So we say average about 6%. Obviously it changes. It's usually based off the S&P 500. So it'll change with the S&P 500. So on a good year, you could get 9, 10, 11%. On a bad year, you could get 0%. But again, in the S&P 500, you'd be losing that money on a bad year. Right. So that 0% floor is a big thing for people who want to make sure that their money's not at risk as they're starting to build that wealth.
And then what are the tax implications?
So when you pull it out, there are no tax implications. It is tax-free because it is your money. So it does grow completely tax-free. And when you pull it out, if you never pull it out, let's say you don't have a home you want to buy, you don't have student loans, let's say you just open it for a savings account type of thing, then at the end, you can actually start pulling it out for retirement, and you won't have to claim that income for your taxes in retirement, which does affect how much Social Security you get. It'll also affect how much tax you might owe on that 401k you're pulling out from, because those are tax deferred. So it's a great extra thing to add to your retirement planning, just so that you have that little bucket of tax-free money. And if there are problems in the stock market, then maybe you can leave your stock accounts alone and only pull from this instead.
Okay. And how early can you start one of these, as far as like for your child, or does it have to be like 18 or?
No, actually I had family in the business, so I have had one since I was 2 years old.
There you go.
So you can start these early.
Okay. And in order to really get the best return, how much do you have to put in to see like some actual money coming in?
Yeah. So the return rate will be the same as far as the percentages. It's a dividend rate that they give to everybody. So I would say if you're looking to get $150,000, $200,000 worth of loans paid off within the next 7-8 years, I'd say minimum $1,500 to $2,000 a month is what's necessary to kind of start putting that in to grow that cash value. Right. However, I have put together plans where people are putting in $200 a month just so that they can have that permanent life insurance. It still grows, just not quite at the same rate. It'll take quite a bit longer to grow, but it is still a great way for people to be putting their money in just so that they have that little extra bit of protection. Or if you have children, knowing that they will be taken care of is a big thing for a lot of my clients.
Right. So $1,500 a month, that's a lot of money to a lot of people.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Right. Okay. So let's say you start at 200. Is there a chance that you could change that 200 to 1,500 if your financial situation were to change at another time, or do you have to write an entirely new policy?
Yeah, so that's actually why I like the Index Universal Life. It has some flexibility, especially the companies I work with, where we can change how much you're putting in. Usually it's a monthly deposit where they'll take it out automatically. So it's also another one of those automatic saving vehicles that we can put together. But you can call up the company and you can add to it. Or let's say we put together a policy at $1,500 a month, and 3 months in, you're seeing that this is kind of difficult. You're not really able to keep up. We can also decrease that amount. It just means obviously it'll grow at a slower rate, and your death rate won't be, or your death benefit won't be quite as high, but it can be adjusted and flexible, which is why I really like the Index Universal Life versus the whole life, which is similar, but not flexible.
Got you. Okay. And so what are some other assets or vehicles that we could use to try to increase our wealth?
Yeah, so definitely, I think real estate is a great one. If you can get into your first home, I mean, homes historically do go up. I know that people are talking about a potential recession, which worries a lot of people, but the only recession that home prices have been affected by was the 2008 recession. Otherwise, they do tend to go up. So I think if you can get into your first home, I mean, you can get as little as 3% down. It's a great way to start growing your net worth and to have some money that you can either cash out of later in order to go buy a different house, maybe even in a different area. I actually moved over to Idaho in order to potentially be able to sell this home and then move back to California. So you can definitely use property as one of those assets. And I also always encourage people, if your 401k plan has a match, get the match, like put in that amount, because that's 100% return on your money and it's free money. I mean, take that match for sure. You want to be taking the match maybe not putting more than the match in, just because the 401k can be problematic in actual retirement.
Right.
And I love to educate people on how it can come out in retirement and what ends up happening there as well, so that they can make a good informed decision. But definitely getting that 401k match. Some employers will do a Roth 401k. Love those. If you can do a Roth, do a Roth.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Anything else that you think would be useful to know as far as like assets that we can include or help build our wealth?
I mean, there are so many, right? So it's hard to go into all of them, but I definitely think for young professionals, another big one that you can add, aside from, your retirement planning, is getting that emergency fund in line. Yeah. I have met a lot of young people who do not have that emergency fund. And I don't believe in a 6-month emergency fund. Yeah. I think that's kind of ridiculous. It's kind of a lot, right? A real emergency is your car breaks down or something breaks in your house, which if you do own a house, you are responsible for everything. So that's part of it. Yeah. But, I like to say 1 to 2 months worth of income usually should be enough to cover those big emergencies. Because if you were to lose your job, you could pull from one of your 401k accounts or from another brokerage account that you had. So that's more of a true emergency fund, I like to think, whereas you should just have some savings so that you don't have to be putting anything on a credit card.
Right. No, that makes sense. Okay. So we've talked about mindset. We've talked about money. How do the two come together?
So the two really come together because your mindset will determine how much money you have and what you're doing with your money.
Right.
So if you can be in the mindset of, I want to be in a better financial situation, I want to retire, I want to own a home, I want to pay off my debts, whatever that goal is, if you can really get very clear on that goal and have your mindset be, I am working towards achieving this goal, that is my number one priority here, then that can make all the difference, because then you'll start to think about your spending. You'll start to think about, like, I had Netflix come out of my account one month and I was like, I don't need to pay for this. Yeah. And I canceled it, right? You start to think about those things when you're paying more attention. So it's all about putting a goal to what you want to do so that mindset will go along with it.
Got you. Is this what you work through when you are working with your clients? Essentially, just kind of raising that awareness and just making sure that once they've gotten really clear about what it is that they want, that awareness piece is always working in tandem with their financial goals.
Yes. So I offer private coaching specifically for this reason. We first work through that mindset. We will go through all of your expenses. We'll talk about it, because I find talking about it with another person for a lot of people is really helpful on do you need it or not? So we go through that. And then once we get you set up in a place where you are starting to pay off those debts, you're starting to build your wealth, we just meet every once in a while so that I can make sure, or you can make sure, that you're staying on track, because having that accountability is a big piece for staying on track, eliminating debt. So I offer my private coaching specifically to deal with these kinds of issues.
No, I understand. So one piece that I've noticed that a lot of people struggle with as far as mindset and money is assessing risk when it comes to investing. Yeah. So how do you help work through that potential resistant to any kind of risk, and not necessarily like taking care of their finances? Because if they've gotten to the point where they're investing, they understand the importance of it, right? So, but risk mitigation or risk aversion is a real thing. So how do you work through that to make sure that the client understands the risk that they're taking by investing, but then also understand the reward and the return?
Right. So I'm a certified wealth management specialist, and part of that was going over just the risk of all of the different investments and how you can correctly diversify and balance out that risk. So I like to work one-on-one with my clients. First, we'll kind of go through just a little talk about what your risk tolerance is. I mean, you come across people, most people are risk adverse, but you also come across people who are like, I want to put all my money in Bitcoin. Right, and it's like, that's not risk averse, right? That's you're willing to take some risks. So Bitcoin may not be the best risk for you, but there are definitely good risks out there that we can take. Right. So then kind of going into then that person who's risk averse, that's where we talk more about those life insurance policies or maybe a tax-free retirement account, because those mitigates the risk of, one mitigates the risk of tax. Well, they both mitigate the risk of tax, but the other one will mitigate that risk of actually losing money in the market, which a lot of people are a lot more comfortable with. And again, with real estate, I mean, there are risks involved with all of it. I like to show what compound interest really looks like. I know a lot of people don't understand the value of compound interest. So I like to show compound interest as a full scale, here's what your money will look like in 40 years, so that I can then say, so there is risk involved, but if we do this correctly and you're investing in the correct funds, in the correct things, you could be set up to retire with $3 million. Who doesn't want that?
Right. Well, and that's something that you're going to be managing, because a lot of people don't know how to do this.
Yeah. So I can do assets under management. I like to offer investment coaching where we work one-on-one, because sometimes, especially for the younger people, it doesn't necessarily make sense to pay the fees that my broker dealers would charge. There are free option, no fee, or low fee options out there. So I like to do the coaching where I really talk you through what you can invest in. We'll do it together. We'll set once every 6 months, once a year, whatever you need. We'll set those meetings to go over it. We'll make sure I'm always available if you need, like right now, the stock market is going crazy, right? I've had a couple of clients call me up just for some reassurance on, hey, these things happen. It always goes back up. You know, I'm always here for that moral support, but I don't necessarily want to put the money under my assets under management if the fees don't make sense.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. So you spoke a little bit about your background as a psychologist. What was your specialty?
So I actually was a behavioral interventionist or a behavioral therapist. I worked with children who had autism, and I worked with them on changing their behavior to, they like to say fit in a little bit better. You know, it's more of like a, you know, reducing tantrums and really starting to get them to kind of visualize the world a little bit differently, because they have a lot of frustration issues. As if you've ever interacted with anyone with autism, they get frustrated very easily. So that's a big one that we would work on there. But I spent a couple of years working with those children, and while I loved it, children just weren't my passion.
Yeah, no, I get that. You know, it's interesting. Once I saw your message on the podcast platform, immediate yes, because I also have a background in behavioral sciences, undergrad psych, right? And then how do we end up in personal finance? Lord knows, but literally, who the heck knows? But even with that being said, like, I'm sure you know better than anyone, and I hope that I confirm this, that behavior, although the focus of behavioral sciences are working with kids that are on a spectrum or have some kind of like social behaviors that need to be addressed so that they can fit into the larger society, these are things that are permeable across all walks of life.
Yes.
Your money, your health, your spirituality, whatever you want to become more disciplined in, or whatever behaviors that you need to address and change, this is real for anyone. They could use those same tools. So I mentioned earlier the stages of change, which was from a behavior book, right? And that I integrated into my business. So what are some of the behavioral pieces that you use that you believe are important to the finance space in order to have people shift and change their behavior other than awareness? Because we've spoken about that.
Right. Yeah. So I think one of the biggest ones is really just the repetitive action. If you've ever been involved in ABA therapy, it's repetitive action is 99% of it, right? But that's what my coaching gives you, right? It's the repetitive action of meeting with me consistently, of going over your budget, of going over what you spent this month. And that's an action and a behavior that a lot of people are not in the habit of doing. They're not looking at their finances. They're not talking about their finances. So I would say that just repetitive motion of we are going to improve your finances. And it's not a one-time thing. It's an every single month. We're going over this. We're talking about it. We're continuing to make improvement is the biggest thing that I like to implement, because consistency, behavior is key. Consistency is key. The two together are just unmatchable.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So more on making sure that mindset and money are walking hand in hand. Would you say that if one person abandons one or the other, that you're either like a hard yes or a hard no on that? Because for me, like I gave you the example earlier, I believe both work hand in hand. but some people abandon one and lean more towards the other. Do you think that's an error, or do you think it can still work if they don't work together?
I think it depends on what they're abandoning and what portion of it they have a problem with. People who already have a decent amount of wealth and they're just looking to invest, or they're just looking for more strategies, it can work. I mean, obviously, whatever mindset they're in is working, right? If they have wealth, something's working. So that can sometimes be navigated through. It's a lot about just having a conversation with the client on how dedicated are you really to this? Because if you're not dedicated to the goal at all, you don't have to believe in my mindset. You don't have to believe in behavioral finance. I know that behavioral science is controversial. You don't have to be behind any of that in order to benefit from my financial strategies, but it does help. But if you don't have a mindset that can build up your wealth, or that can keep you from spending money unnecessarily, then I don't know that there is much I can do to help you, just because you can't invest money you don't currently have.
Right. No, that makes sense. But so it sounds like you're all for the two walking in tandem.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because there are people who argue that you just need more money, and then, money begets money. And then there's some people who are saying, mindset, but then if you just have the mindset and you don't have the funds, then how can you, that's your argument.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So it's all about, they have to go together. There has to be both. Money, you can make more money without a good mindset and you'll still blow it. I promise you that. I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
So, and that's the biggest portion of it, is that people don't realize that more money doesn't fix your problems. It just exacerbates your problems.
Okay. So could you walk me through what it would be like to consult with you? Like, I'm calling you, we're getting on the phone. I've gotten really clear about what my financial goals are. There's no resistance. What would be the next natural step?
So it depends obviously on each client. If you are looking for coaching, then our next step would be to get that coaching program set up, talk about how long you think you'll need that coaching program. I have a couple of different packages based on, length of time and whether or not we're working together in other areas. So if we're going through coaching, then we're starting to get that set up, and we're starting to really talk about, like, that first session of coaching, you're bringing everything with you, or we're not continuing our coaching sessions, right? I'm not here to waste my own time. I'm not here to waste your time. I'm not here to waste your money. If you can't bring me the credit card statements, the loans, anything outstanding you have in order for us to start on our journey, then there is no journey to be had. So that is a big one with coaching, where I find that I've had people invest in it even, and they won't provide the documents that we need in order for it to be successful. And I'm like, I'm not here to not be successful. I'm here to help you be successful.
Right.
Here's what I need to do it.
Right. Okay. No, that's very fair. And I appreciate that. I really do, because it's so painstaking when someone's not prepared. Yeah. And it's a sign, right?
Right. It is. Yeah. It shows that you're going to continue probably on that same behavior through our entire coaching curriculum. And I'm not going to be able to help you. I can usually tell pretty quickly. People who just need investing, obviously that's completely different, right? Like, if you're not getting me your documents right away, you're probably busy if you have money for me to be putting under assets.
Right.
But in a coaching situation where I'm here to actively help you fix your financial situation, if you can't be 110%, I can't give you 110%.
Right. No, that's very fair. So if someone wanted to get in contact with you, how would they go about doing that?
So I am on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, post every single day. So I'm there. I also have a website, larissasteff.com, where there is a Calendly link where you can book a free 15-minute call with me. The first 15-minute call is always free. Usually before we get to coaching, you'll also have had one or two other interactions with me, so that we can make sure that you are a good fit and a good candidate for it.
Right. Okay. And are you on any other social media platform at all?
I am not. I decided to stick with LinkedIn just because it's a social, it's a professional platform, and I'm trying to stick in the professional space.
Got you. Okay. Well, Larissa, thank you so much for entertaining our questions today. I found this information very useful, and I hope that you guys did as well. I feel like sometimes we're beating a dead horse, but sometimes the horse has to be beat. And you said a lot of things that we've already covered, and not covered as far as like the topic, but covered as far as like the importance of mindset and money, and how ignoring one or the other, or really not understanding how they work together, can be to your detriment. to bring other people who also know what they're talking about, so that it's not just me beating everybody over the head with this information, because I'm not a Bible basher. So yeah, I hope this information that you found very useful. If you think that it might benefit you to reach out to Larissa, please do so. She's left her info in the podcast recording, as well as her info will be left in the comment box. If you have any other questions, comments, or concerns, you know where to give us your feedback, to engage with us. Let us know if you liked the episode. Let us know if you didn't like the episode. If you have any more questions that need to be answered, maybe we can do a follow-up. We can do a live. If enough questions come through, then it might be worth our time to come back on and answer some of those questions for the larger population. Until next time, get your money together, get your mindset together, and let's go get this bag. Thank you so much for listening to the Mental Money Podcast. Please go ahead and remember to subscribe, but don't hoard all of this good information for yourself. Share this information with someone that you know could use it, especially if they need a shift in their mindset, or someone who would love to have more money. So until we meet again, remember, like Uncle Snoop said, keep your mind on your money and your money on your mind.